Wednesday. I hope you're having a good week. My name is Jen Walker-Wall. I'm the founder of Work Wonders Careers, where we help mission-driven professionals land new jobs that thrive at work. And you are either here on purpose or by accident, happy accident, perhaps, because you're stumbling into our training on 6 steps to transform your job search. So that's what I'm going to be chatting about today. If you are new here, welcome. If you're a replay viewer, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, welcome. We're so glad to have you here as always. I use these live streams almost weekly to offer what I hope to be like really actionable advice for job seekers and professionals. So nothing particularly high theory here. We really want to help people get traction with their job search and with their career goals. So that is what we are here to do today. I know that navigating the ups and downs of your career can be overwhelming and really isolating. And so I have found that this is a really great platform for making sure that people feel plugged in, that they have a place where they can ask questions and get support. And so LinkedIn Live is like perfect for that, right? Like just hit record, jump right into it. If you are here and watching, please feel free to say hello. Let me know where you are watching from today. I would love to hear from you, or let me know if I'm, just in here talking to myself. But it's always good to see fresh faces and familiar names, and I'm always really grateful for everyone's time. If you want to hear more about our work, you can go to workwonderscareers.com and check that out for sure. We have a fall accelerator that is enrolling, and we have space available for that. So if you are looking for more hands-on support from me and my team, feel free to check that out. But I really want to help you think about new ways to engage your job search today. So I hear from a lot of people about how time-consuming it is and how challenging it is. And hey, John, hey, Adrielle. Oh, wonderful. I was actually just saying to some friends who were asking me about this LinkedIn Live thing, and they're like, what if no one shows up? And I'm like, oh, I just wing it, right? Oh, I was talking to Kika about it. Hey, Christina, nice to see you. I just wing it. I'm a little too comfortable winging it. So thanks for bearing with me no matter what happens here as we go live. I want to just share a little bit as we're getting started why I'm so excited about this training and like why I think that this training is so important for me and hopefully for you as well. So first of all, I think that this is some of the best like free and public available content that I can share. It's a 30,000 foot view of the work that we do with our clients. So if you are curious about like what happens when you work with us one-on-one or when you join one of our programs, you're going to see today the various components that we bring together that we think are really critical for job seekers today. The other piece is that people need skills and knowledge to effectively own their mobility, right? Like if you don't know how to leverage your resume or, create and build a professional network, you might not be able to kind of feel like you're in the driver's seat of your own career. And that's like one thing we're pretty passionate about is like helping people reclaim the power that they do have in this process. Because I know it can feel like you don't have any, but you do. And so I think today's training is really going to help with that. I'll also just say that I think it's a really incredible time to be job searching. I was just on Instagram and I was saying like, I've never seen anything quite like what I've seen in the last 6 months. And I've been doing this for 7 years and I was in hiring before that. So I'm like super familiar with the ebbs and flows of this process. So if you are on the fence or kind of want to explore your options or are hesitant to start a job search because you fear that it's going to become like another full-time or part-time job, I really want to encourage you to consider it because it is a really good time. At least it seems to be from my vantage point here. The other reason, perhaps most importantly, is that the job search is really not just about the resume or interview. Now, if you've come to these lives before or like ever interacted with me as a human being, I've probably talked about resumes with you. But at the end of the day, like the challenges that our clients are bringing to the table for our help to solve are not just about job search strategy. They are often like, I need help with my resume and I need help interviewing, but they're also people who struggle to manage their time. They struggle to make decisions, right? That can be really scary. And there's a lot of decisions to be made in the job search process. Like every day, pretty much you have to make some decisions. And that can be really overwhelming. People can be coming from like toxic and unhappy work situations and really lack confidence about moving their careers in a different direction, or even feeling optimistic about landing a job that's a better fit. People struggle to ask for help. They feel too pushy or self-promotional. And so they tend to like work really independently. And who among us has not procrastinated in the job search process, right? Like who can raise their hand and say they've never done that? Certainly not me. And so what I think is really interesting about these challenges is they're not really about the job search strategy, but they are about how we think about strategy more broadly. And so the way I see it is that our clients don't just need more knowledge, although that's a huge component. They need to change their behavior in some way. They need to do things differently. And that is just like a whole other beast, a whole other problem to solve. And so today I want to think about what it will take to help people change their behavior and maybe their relationship to the job search process. Hey, Maureen. Oh, I've got friends, so many friends here today. And Alexandra, nice to see you all. Oh, glad you could catch us live, Alexandra, this time. That's awesome. So here are some things I just want to say before I dive into the framework here, which is that it is inherently circular. Okay, it's like totally non-linear. In fact, I'm going to walk us through the cycle, the big picture cycle in today's session. So I want you to keep that in mind. And I also want you to know, and we'll talk about this too, that there are lots of ways to do this well and to do this effectively. So there's more than one way to operationalize each of these steps, and what the right move for you might be, might not look anything like someone else's. So it's very individualized and easy to customize. And that's one of the reasons we use a framework, because our clients actually all have pretty different needs. Even though there's some common threads, there's some really important nuances. And I think this kind of flexible framework allows us to address that. So let me just see here. I created some banners today to help create a little structure. Give me 1 second. There we go. So the first step in the framework that I think is super critical is self-reflection and assessment. This is where we're going to start and end today's training. We're going to work our way all the way back here. So have you ever thought to yourself, okay, I'm ready to start my job search. I'm ready to apply for these kinds of roles. And then you log into LinkedIn and you see all kinds of other jobs that are like suddenly kind of fascinating, but you're not sure if you're qualified. And then you get frustrated and log out, or maybe you email yourself some jobs, but then you just kind of never really revisit them. That's something I hear about all the time. So people may even ask you something like, what do you want to do next? And you could struggle to articulate that, right? And of course, it's one thing to struggle to articulate it to a friend, but that can mean it's really hard to advocate for yourself if you're in an interview context. So one of the reasons that we start with self-reflection is like, there is no strategy that doesn't start with you and your needs and your goals and your interests in this process. If we don't take that into account and allow it to create the constraints and boundaries around this process, you do not have a strategic job search. You just have a job search, which is something we'll all probably have. Okay, there's always times when people need a job. But a lot of times people skip this step. I think they're trying to save time. But this is where we really need to take a deep dive into what it is that we want. And this is a process, a step really, that is entirely for our own knowledge, our own, sense of things, right? It's not something we have to share publicly. It's something you could do with a friend, by yourself. But I want you to really think about, this is where we start to own truths and tell difficult truths about things that have been disappointing and things that have not worked out. It's where we start to articulate what we want and need out of a job. So, something that I see happen all the time is a client will say to me, how do I negotiate my salary with this offer? And I will say, what is your target offer? Like, what would you like them to come back with? And I won't get an answer. Like, clients will actually not know what to ask for. And so like we actually need to know, like we can do some market research data. We can look at our own budgets and think about like where we'd like to be. So it's hard to be strategic if we don't have a good sense of what it is that we're trying to obtain, right? So a lot of times people come into the process looking for like an eject button, get me out of my current situation, but we want to actually try and create the foundation to land you somewhere more optimal, right? And here's what I really like about this piece. I think that this reflection and assessment gives our search integrity. It gives our search boundaries and constraints and a chance to be honest about what we've experienced. We don't go into interviews and say like, my boss sucks, right? But there might be some important things to get out of that, right? If you're someone in a work situation that's really not healthy or working out for you. We want to create a place to really think about that. So when we have this kind of information, we return back to this place to recalibrate. So when we have a phone screen or we have an informational interview, when we have an actual interview, even when we're going through the negotiation process, we return to this step in the process. It's not just one and done. We come back to this place and say like, how does this align with my goals? Can I ask for what I want? What am I willing to compromise on here, right? This part of the process is entirely about you and setting your goals and criteria. And if you have a job search and you don't have criteria for potential employers, I think it's going to be hard to know if you have landed a job that's a really great fit. So revisiting this place over and over again, and certainly spending a little bit of time starting here is time really well spent. And I think sometimes people hear self-reflection and think it's a place where they have to spend weeks or months. But honestly, if you can spend hours here, that would be good. A few hours can go a really long way and make a commitment to yourself to revisit here. So that's the first really foundational step in our process, right? Is self-reflection and assessment. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Here are some questions maybe you can respond to and let me know what you think. Are you clear about your own value in your job search? Do you know really clearly what it is that you can bring to the table? Does your search, do the roles and companies that you're targeting reflect your goals and needs? Or is it like a spray and pray approach, right? So are you just applying all over the place and like fingers crossed, hoping for the best? I see a lot of that and I totally get the appeal, right? But then you turn your job search into a numbers game. And we want to put you into the driver's seat and making a few more active decisions. So feel free to let me know. I see Alexandra says, I knew what I wanted and ultimately they were only willing to go up by $5K. I had to weigh other benefits. That's such a good point because the truth is like, I was actually just talking to a family member about this, like health insurance, retirement, like that stuff is cash at the end of the day. And so really looking at the other benefits and figuring that out. Sometimes clients will, get an offer that's less, but with the benefits, it's a lot more. So we call that in the biz total compensation. So it's really important to have a good sense of what that is. The second step in this framework is, if reflection is sort of where we start and it's the internal piece, the second step is revision. It is strategically leveraging the assets we have at our disposal as job seekers and professionals to reflect outward what our goals are, what we've learned from that self-reflection period. So this isn't where we solely focus on our goals and needs. It's where we sort of start to marry our goals by speaking and communicating to other people's needs and goals, right? And so these other people might include people like recruiters and hiring managers, right? And so finding a way to communicate effectively in the job search process is hugely important. And I want to be clear that I don't think that this transforms our job search into an audition or a performance. Some of you have probably heard me say that before. But what we want to do is offer what we can in response to things like job postings or informational interviews. And what we want to look for here as we're putting those materials and having those conversations out in the world is for like genuine and mutual connection and resonance and like mutually beneficial opportunities, right? And we do this by being strategic, clear, and responsive to what people like recruiters and hiring managers are looking for. And so for me, when I'm talking about resumes, this means I pay a lot of attention to what's in the qualifications for different kinds of jobs, and really making sure we're doing the work of translating or revising people's resumes, and also sort of their narratives about themselves in a way that incorporates, the language and the order of priorities that these jobs that they're interested in are actually asking for. Honesty is important. So the goal here is not to like twist ourselves into a pretzel to impress and land the job. Doing so may very well result in landing a job. But what we're really looking for when clients come to work with us are jobs that are a great fit, right? And that's really important. That's what people come to work with us for. So revision is the place where we restructure resumes. We make them easy to read and scan quickly, right? Because I always tell my clients, like, no one's spending as much time on your resume as I am. It's where we use strategies like the summary of qualifications to effectively and efficiently customize our application, address those needs of the recruiters and hiring managers. And it's where we create LinkedIn profiles that both speak to the breadth of the roles that we're looking for and are kind of keeping in mind what folks hiring for those kind of roles might be searching for. So it's really like, it's an art. It's not a science. It's much more of an art, but it's really about learning to communicate in a way where other people can really understand your value. And we're doing a little bit of that work for them because we're keeping in mind, especially recruiters and kind of frontline hiring stakeholders, the volume of people they're seeing is significant. And if we're relying on them to kind of go through every line of our resume to make sure that we're qualified, we may be asking too much. I know sometimes people think that's just what recruiters have time to do, but they're usually hiring for many other positions. They have dozens, maybe hundreds of applicants for different kinds of roles. And so we use this revision stage to really try and resonate quickly right off the bat, right? That's why that summary of qualifications goes at the top of your resume there. So I think that that's a really important piece of this, is like learning how to effectively communicate and be responsive to what other people are looking for, while also honoring what you need and where you're at in the process. I want to say too, because it's so easy for people to kind of slip into this performance or audition mode. So here's a reminder that, like, not everyone, not all potential employers deserve to be impressed by you. Okay, I'm going to say it one more time. Not everyone deserves to be impressed by you in this process. So when you are out there sharing your resume, sharing your, stories and experience in interviews and conversations, I want you to also be looking for that connection and that resonance in these interactions, because I think it can really help people get a sense of, what that job and opportunity is going to be like in the day-to-day. So some questions for those of you watching, regarding the revision step. Do you know how to leverage your resume to speak to the needs of a particular job? Have you practiced distilling your experience into concise, short stories? Or is this an area where you need to do some work? And that's another reason the framework is so great, is because it makes really clear, what do I need to do next? Maybe there is a gap in my strategic approach to the job search process. And I think that that could be really helpful. So let me talk about the third step here, which is super critical. Let's see, sorry, going a little slow here. Yeah, Maureen, that's actually the name of my resume writing service, is Resonate. And that's why, that's what I value there, is like mutually beneficial kind of connection. And I think that that's a really good benchmark to set for people. So thank you for that. So imperfect action is so important because, I career coach, so we have clients and we have, a group program and all of that. But another piece of our business is I write resumes for people. And one of the things I'm listening for when I'm talking to a potential resume client is this someone who is going to submit this resume? And if I get the sense that a person is not in the habit or has trouble putting themselves forward for opportunities, I will often not recommend the resume writing service. I will often kind of push them in a direction where they get a little bit more support around that, because a resume needs to be submitted to be successful. And I don't want to be writing resumes alone as a service for people who aren't going to be able to kind of get the full value from them. So this stage of step 3 imperfect action is really sort of about combating a lot of things. I would say perfectionism, procrastination, fears, right? There's a lot of like stuff that can slow us up. And I don't want to oversimplify or minimize like what those challenges or thoughts or experiences might be that kind of get people to the stage. But I will say it's extremely widespread. Okay. This is like a very normal piece of the puzzle for pretty much everyone that we work with. Knowing what to do and doing it are two problems that both need to be solved in this process. And so to some degree, what I think I see here is that people are a little bit more comfortable with where they're at than potentially, for example, getting into a job where things could be worse or where they're experiencing rejection. It's a little bit of like the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, right? So my trick, my hack, if you will, is to encourage people to significantly, yes, imposter syndrome. Exactly, right? We could make a really long list of things that get in people's way here. So my trick is to encourage people to literally lower the bar on the expectations that you have for yourself. So whatever it is that you think you're going to put out into the universe, take it down several notches. There's more than one good way to write a resume. 100%. Okay. And there are some things where I just have like a really particularly strong preference. And I have to say to clients, this is not going to make or break you. This is just me getting really nerdy about something I like, about something I've specialized in. Right. So there's many ways to do this well. Many people are doing it well for themselves. There are awkward moments in every interview. So just because you interview and there are some lulls or pauses or awkward moments doesn't mean it's a terrible interview. So, you can embrace a little bit of that and know that it's just really part of the process of kind of meeting and experiencing new people. There are always opportunity for learning and growth in this process for everyone. And people can get jobs without being perfect. I think I'm in the minority in this as a career coach, but as someone who used to work in hiring, I would see typos all the time. Like, I don't think typos are the biggest mistake to make, especially if you have a lot of other strong qualifications. I know there are people who disagree with me and they make hiring decisions too. So obviously we want your materials to be clean and well polished. But really we have to kind of think big picture here. You have to be submitting resumes to be considered for the most part. And so I'd rather that people make peace with a lower bar and lower the expectation for themselves than try to, spread themselves too thin or really like not take action at all. So here are just some of the strategies that some of our clients might adopt at this particular stage in the process or when they're feeling just like they're not making any progress. Is that one is having a submission ritual. So for me, I don't apply for jobs online, but when I'm returning resumes for example, to clients that hire me to write them, one thing that I do, well, there's several things that I do. So I will spend the first part, I will restructure the resume, I will revise the resume. So I'll do the big picture stuff and make sure it's super easy to read. Then the next day, I will go through and spend a ton of time optimizing the content of the resume. And then I will sleep on it. Okay. I do my best work. Like if I could write resumes between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m., that's like my ideal brain power time. And I will spend time looking at all of the edits I made before I hit submit early the following day. And that's sort of like the process that I got into because I know it allows me to create my best work and also review my best work before sending it out to clients. So think about what that could be for you. Some people have a friend review their applications. Some people sleep on it like I do. Some people just do it all in like one swift hour-long setting. They don't have to think too much about it. You can experiment here. I also think having support or encouragement of other job seekers is really helpful and potentially critical for a lot of people in this process. You may have people in your network who are job seeking. You may be in a professional association where there are other job seekers. And so finding a way to kind of engage with others can be really a game changer here. Also, we make a game sometimes out of rejection. So for those who really fear getting that kind of message where they're not going to hear back or, they're going to get a rejection email, I always try to preface this experience, this job search experience with, it is impossible to go through this process and not experience rejection. That's the bad news, right? The good news is that you can have a successful job search and still experience rejection. And so one way we try to get clients to think about this differently is to turn the rejection into something we're trying to avoid, into something we're trying to obtain. The good news about rejection is that it means you're doing something. That part I said earlier, where we're trying to change your behavior, where you might be avoiding applying to jobs or emailing yourself jobs that you never apply to, at least being rejected means you submitted something. So sometimes we will challenge clients to get 10 rejections. And I don't even know if I've had clients who've gotten 10 rejections without also getting an interview in the process, right? So sometimes the pursuit of the worst possible scenario actually helps get us where we are. So if you are someone who can turn that into a little game or challenge for yourself, that might be, a fun way to kind of reframe the rejection process. And here is a little soapbox moment for me while we're talking about imperfect action. I know that people come to us to land new jobs. That's what we're known for. That's like 95% of our clientele that's what they want. They want a new job, and they don't want a new job like a year from now. They want it sooner rather than later. And so we have worked really hard in the last 7 years to put together programs and services that help people do that. But let me tell you what's in this for me. Like, my secret goal for everyone is that it's really not just to help people land a new job. That can be a very short-term, almost transactional experience, really. But the reason we set people up in this way and kind of leverage this framework and these components is because a lot of what people bring into the job search process are things we've learned in the kinds of work environments we're trying to get out of. So this constant sense of like not being good enough, the imposter syndrome at work suddenly turns into my resume isn't good enough, or I don't belong here, I'm not good enough. And we are looking to really help people think about that in a different way, in both the short term and the long term. So when you show up to do this work and engage with it imperfectly, this whole process, you are going to iterate and you're going to improve and you're going to learn. And that's a step that a lot of people don't take. And so when our clients do, or when, people hear about this framework and are able to engage differently in the job search process, I actually think that alone is worth celebrating. So don't wait until you get an offer to celebrate. Celebrate when you are changing your behavior. Acknowledge the shift in your behavior. It's a huge thing to ask people to apply to fewer jobs with, applications we've asked you to lower your expectations on. But we're taking for granted that we know you're capable. We know you are generating good, outputs into the job search process. And that's what we want you to ultimately yield. So let me know in the comments, are these fears showing up for you? Is the imposter syndrome rearing its head? And were there any suggestions here that might help you move forward in a different way? I would also be really curious if anyone here has any suggestions. Like, is anyone dealing with this kind of on their own? And have they come up with any, good strategies that they might like to share? All right, so let me talk about the next step here. Let's forward. So the fourth step in our process is called care. And so I want to talk a little bit about this because, there's a reason it's not called self-care, although it is inclusive of that. I remember one time I had a client tell me, I'm sorry I didn't do my homework, like I said I would do. My kid got sick and I had to go to the ER, and I apologize if I've wasted your time. She was apologizing to me. And I remember being surprised by the apology and like how worried she was that I would, have some kind of judgment or like what the repercussions would be for not like updating her resume between calls. And so I said, it sounds like you made a really good decision there for yourself and your family. And that's what I see a lot, is that people make good decisions that force them maybe to honor other priorities and relationships other than their job search. And so I think the frustration is that there's only so many hours in a day. It's really hard to work, have a family, have relationships, have friends, have rest, and have like a job search process. And when people feel too pulled in too many different directions and don't have the focus that they're hoping for, they can be exhausted and feel really resentful. So that piece I totally get. So what I want to say is, like, I think that having an efficient job search, right, which is really an efficient and effective job search, which is really what all these steps are about, is really to allow you to engage in relationships and other components of your life that are not work or job search. In the last 18 months alone, I can tell you this has looked like people feeling torn, between writing to their senators, dismantling white supremacy. I don't actually want people to like job search instead of do those really important things, right? Just like I don't want to work and not be able to engage in those certain things too. So there's a way in which there's a community care element that a lot of our clients feel pulled, they need to address. And so everything we do around efficiency is really so that they can tend to these other parts of their life and world that we also deeply value. But also this is like self-care in your personal relationships and your interpersonal life, right? Like if you've got hobbies or, you just need rest, you just need to unplug, or I don't know, you need to watch Hocus Pocus 13 times between now and Halloween. We want that for you as well. And so this care component, sometimes people need to hear from us. It's okay if you need to take a break from this. It's okay if you need to take a break from the job search. Yes, you can go on vacation as a job seeker. Yes, you can take the weekend off. And what we find when people really allow themselves to elevate their job search strategy and take time off is that they are simply more effective with the time that they have. And they're often able to just be less stressed out, less resentful, less exhausted. To say nothing of how critical, engaging in, community work has certainly been for people. So I don't want to suggest that your job search should override these other elements of your life or our lives, right? I want to help you see that they can be an ongoing piece of your life while you are job searching. And we hope that you'll engage some of the pieces of this that will make your job search more efficient and more effective. All right. There are a couple of steps left. Let me see here. So if you have any questions about the framework or anything I've shared so far or any comments on this, definitely let me know so I can address those before we wrap up today. But the next piece that I want to talk about is connection. So sometimes people might think of this as networking, but you know what? People hate networking. So I call it something different. That's my secret. The job search is ultimately about two things. Communication, as I've said, that's why we spend so much time in the revision process, and interaction. Nobody gets a job without these two things. Both of these things are important. To that end, I think personally that it makes zero sense to work on your job search like it's some kind of top secret project. So connection can mean a lot of different things. So it can mean simply getting back in touch with your references, having accountability and encouragement from the people you know, co-working with other job seekers, finding people in your network who are willing to share their resources, knowledge, or insight. And for our clients, it usually means a combination of these things. A lot of people like to keep their job search for themselves. And this is not, a demand or a suggestion that you tell your boss or all of your closest colleagues about your job search. Obviously, there's reasons you don't want everyone to know necessarily. Some people do have a relationship with people at work where they can share this sort of thing, but most people, I think, really don't. But this is a process that has a lot of ups and downs, okay? And it's so much harder and less pleasant, quite frankly, to navigate all of that when you're doing it all alone. It is more effective, and most importantly, it is more fun to do it in the company of other people and to realize that you have shared challenges, that there's nothing, particularly unique about what you're experiencing, and that there are like people who've overcome these challenges and you can engage and learn from and learn with them in the process. We host office hours as part of our Work Wonders & Co. and our accelerator programs, right? So it's like a call where I show up and I field questions from job seekers. And when I conceptualized the program, like when we first launched this like 3 years ago, the point was like, let's give people knowledge, like let's be available to answer their questions and, make sure that they kind of keep moving in the process. And what is so interesting, like 3 years later, is like, yes, I think people show up because they have questions and they want to ask and they want feedback and they need to recalibrate. And like there's like a logistical, tactical component to it, of course. But I can't tell you like how many times people show up to those calls feeling like a little demoralized, disappointed, frustrated, or overwhelmed, and leave having spent an hour engaging with peers and in our group, feeling like a lot more motivated and excited. So I've started to really think of that as like just that having that connection for an hour and a half, a couple times a month, really rejuvenates people. And I wish more people would sort of give themselves the gift of like, bringing some good minds together and sorting through some problems, because it's not just a tactical or logistical component of our program. Like I think it's energetically really important for people. So I think it's really critical to like not minimize or discount that piece of it. We don't want this process to be any more isolating than it needs to be. I also just want to say that, a lot of people who come to us and are like not super psyched with their jobs, one of the reasons they're leaving often is because they're lacking this connection at work. They don't have supportive colleagues. They don't have a helpful boss. They don't have a champion or a mentor who's really looking out for them. They may not have peers that they can trust or turn to. And so it may be a goal of yours, of those of you watching, to land a job where you have a better relationship with people at work. And that's a good goal. And I want that for you if that's what you're focused on. But I also want you to know that that sort of supportive relationship like isn't limited to a job, and you can find ways to give yourself the opportunity to connect and share and relate with others. It's one of the reasons we host these calls on LinkedIn, but there are so many like groups and like opportunities for you to engage with people and peers and others in your field and other job seekers or career changers, so that I really recommend that you do not do this alone. I guess is where I'm going with that. Sometimes I think we recreate the job search as a terrible job all on its own. And so something I like to sometimes offer to clients is like, what if you were designing this as a job? Like, what would it feel like? What would it look like if this looked more like how you'd like to experience your own work? And if that means deeper, better connections, then I hope you find and experiment with some ways to kind of obtain that. So I'd like to hear from people here if they're willing to share, like, how do you want your job search process to feel? I think most people don't think about that question. And I'm not saying you're going to have total control over how it feels the whole time, but I think in terms of thinking strategically and coming up with a plan and thinking about what resources you can infuse in the process, that would be helpful to think about. And what kind of support would be helpful? Not everyone needs the same thing here. Some people don't need encouragement. They're like really great little worker bees, but sometimes people do need that accountability, or they need some expertise, or they need that insight. So it's just some things for you folks to think about. See what Alexandra says. I have a great support outside work, but I've wanted a deeper relationship with my supervisor. So I feel my supervisor invests in my growth as much as I invest in the growth of the organization. Yes. 100%, right? Like this should be, again, resonance, mutually beneficial. That's really what we are looking for here. All right. And I promised that we would come back to step 1, even though this says step 6, because we're at a different place. Invigorating. Oh, I love that, John. That's great. So these are really good things. Like if this is what you want out of your job, like what would it feel like to have a job search that was invigorating? I love that. I think it's not easy to have a job search that feels invigorating all the time, but what would you do if you were looking for that in your job search? I would like for the job search to be more structured. I love your framework. Thank you. I'm a girl with a plan. I like to see things all laid out. And it's very easy for me to just like lay out these steps. But I can assure you, if there's any clients in the room, like this is very up and down. It's not always easy to kind of access the linear way I've pulled this out for this particular presentation. But being able to come back and like return to a space and using this framework as self-reflection, it's like, do I need to do some additional reflection? Do I need to take some additional action? Do I need to make some additional revisions? Do I need to ask for help or support? Like it can be a really helpful tool for that. So I'm glad you think so too. I want the job search to be, oh, this gives me goosebumps. It's very hard to convince people that there's like a long-term value in having a job search. And so I always get excited when my clients have a chance to have conversations or interviews, because who knows what could come from that. I remember I was once a finalist, like earlier in my career, for a job, and I didn't get it. It went to an internal candidate, but the hiring manager was so kind and really went out of her way to say, how great she thought I was and how she would have loved to have worked with me, but they just had an internal candidate and, wanted to move forward with someone that they already knew. And she was like, I'd love to keep you in mind. And I didn't think much of it, but like 6 or 9 months later, she forwarded me a job opportunity and said, my colleague in another department is hiring for the exact role you applied for. I would be happy to pass your resume on. If you were still interested and are still searching, let me know. And she actually got me a job at that organization. So it's hard again, and it's easy for me to say here, it's a great long-term investment of time. Sometimes you're really looking for that new job, and I know it can be frustrating, but a lot of these seeds are planted here, and we just never know when it's going to be useful. So thank you, Alexandra, for reminding us there's a lot of value here over the long term. So we're back at step 1/step 6 here, self-reflection and assessment. And like I said, this is a cycle. It's non-linear. So we're coming back here. And one of the things we do when we very consciously come back here is like, we actually have to take action first, right? Like there's not going to be much of a job search to assess if we haven't implemented some of this. So it's a good opportunity to see, where have we taken action? What have we been avoiding? How can we shift our behavior a little bit further? So if you've been experimenting and you've been out there and you've been applying and you've been collecting information, there's a chance here to assess and review it. So here are some questions that I might ask clients. Like, are you applying for jobs? Are you getting interviews? Are you initiating or reconnecting to new or existing relationships? Are you clear about what you want? For people who are kind of pre-application and in a more exploratory job search phase, maybe you're doing research online and attending webinars or having informational interviews. Are you able to kind of articulate the scope of what you're looking for? Does it help you kind of get closer to applying for the job? That's one of the things we would want, to know. I recommend tracking all of this, whether it's a spreadsheet or a journal, whichever, both will work. It just depends on sort of what your orientation is to writing and tracking things. I think that that's so helpful, because sometimes whatever data we've collected, if it's not written down, it gets lost up here in our stressful moments. So I like having things written down. Like, I've talked to X number of people, I've applied to X number of jobs. It also really helps me when I'm talking to potential clients on the phone. Sometimes I'll say, like, how many jobs have you applied to with your resume? Oh, I don't know, maybe 6, maybe, 6 in the last 18 months. It's like, that helps me decide, like, can we say for sure that your resume is not working for you, or is it that you're just not applying to enough jobs, or what might be happening here? So it's really hard to kind of pivot and like iterate if you're not keeping track of what you're doing. So let me see here. It's also an opportunity to check in and make sure that you're generating the right opportunities. So this is like a less common but still persistent challenge I see from some clients, which is that their resume and their interviews are in fact generating more interviews and offers for them, but they're not happy with the outcomes. Like, they're not really enjoying what that looks like when the offers finally come down, which I think is a real fascinating challenge. And so the good news is that, these people are probably really compelling candidates with a lot of good experience, but, you may need to come back to the space and say, like, what's not resonating for me? Like, do I want these jobs? So some people feel like they've got to stay kind of applying to the kind of jobs that make sense for them. And those can be not compelling sometimes. Sometimes people love that perfect linear, trajectory, but it's not for everyone all of the time. So if you're generating opportunities, but you're not really excited or eager to accept them, there's definitely a chance for both reflection and revision to happen again. So, we say, like, don't skip starting with this step. We also don't want you to skip this step, this iteration of the step. Write down what you're doing, write down what you're learning, so that when you go to make decisions or figure out where you're at in the process, you have evidence documented, right? We're not relying on memory or anything like that. It makes a big difference. I think it can be really grounding for people. For every job where I was a finalist and didn't get the job, I have requested these folks on LinkedIn. I love this. As soon as I land my new role, I will send them a note to say thank you, which prepare. I love this. That is chef's kiss. Alexandra, you get an A today. That's excellent. I mean, the reason I love that so much is people don't do this by and large. And it creates such good, energy, and it's, it kind of fuels that connection. One of the most common questions I get is like, I'm connected to this person. Now what? What does it mean to like build a relationship or start a relationship? And I think professional relationships can look just like what Alexandra described. We met once or a couple times in the interview process. I kept in touch, on LinkedIn as a connection, and I let you know that I landed a job and I was grateful. Like, those are some really great initial steps. Then you can engage in their work. You can celebrate their work. You can share their work. You can share their job postings. There's like a lot of ways to kind of build that trust and connection using the LinkedIn platform. I also really like this tool. I have a lot of clients who use this. So I'll do a little plug for them there. All right, so that is my 6-step process. I will do a last call for questions here. And I will also just share a reminder that we are opening up actually it is opened. The Fall Job Search Accelerator is already open for registration. We're kicking off the week of October 25th. So if you are looking for structure and feedback and support on your job search, we're offering a chance to work with me and my team for 4 weeks. In an accelerated rate, where every week you get feedback on your resume, a chance to have your questions answered by me and our private online community. So if that is something that is of interest to you, or you just like to get on our mailing list and learn more about when we have some upcoming chats like this, you can head over to workwonderscareers.com. Otherwise, I want to thank each of you for taking time out of your day. This is like 47 minutes long. So thank you for being here. It's a little bit longer than my normal weekly pop-in, but it was really great to see all of you. And let me know if you have any questions. If you're watching the replay, please feel free to add comments and questions. Just tag me so that I'll see it, because sometimes I miss them. And otherwise, I hope you all have a really great rest of your week. Take care. Talk soon.